we can take a look here. I thought this was pretty funny. I haven't watched the whole thing yet. We'll see how far we make it. But yeah, let's react to this. Definitely some interesting content from Mr. Vaush. And obviously, most people know that I'm a fan of Krystal Ball and breaking points and all that stuff, but obviously they're not above criticism, right? Like, they've gotten things wrong before. I certainly don't agree with everything that Saagar and Enjeti has said. That's for sure. He stands for a lot of things, which I wholeheartedly reject. So again, I'm just to give Vaush the benefit of the doubt here. Let's see if he has anything correct to say here in his analyzation, because I don't want to just come at this from like a Vaush bad, breaking points good stance. Like, no one is above criticism. But yeah, let's take a look, guys. Interested to check this out. Again, breaking points brings on Glenn Greenwald. Stupidity ensues. So let's see if stupidity does in fact ensue.
All right. People were linking the hell out of this video to me the other day. The Breaking Points January 6th video featuring everyone's favorite Republican, Glenn Greenwald. Let's go. The last video that we saw from Breaking Points was agonizingly stupid. They basically took a tweet thread and used it to presuppose that a Nazi march in Washington was some kind of fed op with demonstrably, provably false information. And then we looked over the YouTube comments and people were soy-facing and praising them for their real journalism as they read tweets and, say things that are incorrect. So now we have Glenn Greenwald, another person who's very fond of Twitter and being incorrect. Let's go. How the deep state has weaponized Jan 6. Let's go. I love that. Very left-leaning title.
Joining us now, we have Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, the one and only Glenn Greenwald. Of course, you guys know he's on Substack as well as...
All right, hold on, wait. This is Krystal's exposed skin and not an additional slab of flesh sort of draped on top of her shoulder, right?
As Rumble and a bunch of other platforms. Where do you mostly want people to follow you at this point, Glenn?
Yeah, the writing is on Substack.
With the lighting, it's hard to tell if I'm looking at a collarbone shadow here. Is it just a big band-aid? Honest to God, I think the shading here is a bit bad, like the lighting, but I respect the style. I don't care. Do wacky fashion. I don't care.
I do video reports on Rumble, and then there's a new podcast app called Callin, which a bunch of people like Brianna Joy Gray and Matt Taibbi and many others are using. So any of those platforms will...
Including us. We're also on Callin. Hit it up. Hit it up.
And also, of course, my frequent appearances here on Breaking Point.
Yes. Okay, quick follow-up question. Is Glenn Greenwald currently being life drained by a lich? Is he in Siberia? Yeah, is he speaking from the astral plane? Why is he gray? What is happening?
This is all a bunch of irrelevant commentary to get to the point where a bunch of irrelevant.
I love those.
Are really good. I know you put a lot of time and effort into those, and that's not, I guess I maybe have added respect.
Oh, he's in the gray zone.
To what we do. So
you're right.
Like personally, he's doing a good job at that thing. Anyway,
thank you.
Wanted to bring you on to focus in particular on the dangers of how 1/6 has been weaponized to further the interests of the security state. Because in a lot of ways, 1/6 was like a dramatic failure in terms of being able to protect the Capitol and keep people down, keep the barricades up. So this massive failure for the security state that they then, as they always do, somehow turn around and use to make themselves only stronger. So was hoping you could...
Hold on. Is Breaking Points the channel that pretends to be centrist? Where is that old video edit of mine? My assessment of the Rising. Where was that? Where was that old video of mine? It's still true. Everything that I said back then is still true. Is this it? Hold on. Here we go.
A gay pride flag for the LGBT month. And Krystal Ball will say, yeah, well, this is good, I guess, but we have to recognize that corporate hegemony is never going to sincerely, promote the interests of gay people. This is just a virtue signaling attempt to get their attention. And Saagar will say,
you're completely right. This is just virtue signaling. Corporations have been brainwashed by post-Frankfurt neo-Marxist academics who are trying to disseminate an anti-white agenda by educating the wealthy and the children of the wealthy to hate white people in the pursuit of a wokeness cult.
And Krystal Ball will say, well, I don't know if I agree about that, but I do agree that corporations are bad. And Saagar will say,
yes, corporations are bad. You know who else believes that? Tucker Carlson. Let's go to a Tucker Carlson clip, folks.
Cue 2 minutes of Tucker Carlson in the middle of a segment about how black people aren't humans, talking about how corporations are bad because they support black people, but in like
By the way, I don't know if I've ever seen Krystal or Saagar, even at the Hill, play a Tucker Carlson clip. Like, unless I'm missing something, I don't remember them ever being like, now cut to Tucker Carlson. Let's listen to him talk about this. Like,
I think what he's referencing is the fact that they have like a lot of they used to have like panels or whatever with a bunch of like heterodox different viewers, and it would be like, oh, after we've done our little intro on Rising, then we'll like cut to like Marshall Kosloff and like 4 other people, and sometimes those people are like from the Federalist or like from what's the Daily Caller or whatever the fuck. So I imagine that's what he's referring to. And just to give credit where credit is due, that opening bit was pretty fucking funny in that video. I was laughing genuinely. But yeah, he's completely full of shit, and he's straw manning them to set up his own beatdown and pretending that they're way more to the right than they are. And he's also making Krystal look dumb as rocks on purpose. Like, I can appreciate that that's good comedy and that that's definitely gonna land with the audience that he wants it to land with. But that's exactly what he's doing, guys. This isn't super heavy lifting here. He's straw manning it. He's cutting the argument in half right now before he even gets going. So he's already discredited the people that he's going to talk about with sleazy, not real criticisms of their journalism, right? The kind of shit that he would probably turn around and critique somebody else for. But that's exactly how Vaush makes his entire living, just being slightly better at doing the things that he critiques other people for on a day-to-day basis. But anyway,
yeah, totally. It's an absolute straw man. And yeah, like I said, Breaking Points, Krystal Saagar, not above criticism. They've had some cringy segments for sure. I'm not saying that everything they've ever said or stood for, I sign off on. I don't. But this is a straw man, and it's exactly what Vaush claims to hate, which is when he's like, oh, people don't actually listen to me. They just, repeat memes about me that aren't true and distort my actual perspective in order to score points against me, which is true. Some people do that with Vaush, but that's exactly what he's doing with fucking Krystal and Saagar here.
Gavin said doo-doo.
Doo-doo.
Yeah, and things haven't changed. If anything,
and also I just want to break in real quick. It's not Krystal's responsibility to like have a debate with Saagar every time they disagree about fucking anything. Like, come on, man. Like, obviously, if you're going to do a show with someone who doesn't agree with you 100% of the times, they're going to say things that you disagree with. You can't be expected to fucking sit there and turn every episode into a goddamn debate. Sometimes Zac will say shit that I disagree with, probably a lot less than, the things that Saagar says, which Krystal disagrees with, but still, I just let it fucking go. Not everything has to be a goddamn blowout. Not everything has to be a fucking debate. That doesn't mean everything Zac says I agree with 100%, but I respect him, so I'm going to let him fucking make his points without being like, well, actually, every 5 goddamn minutes. That would be annoying and fucking grating to listen to, and I think that, Krystal has the same approach. She's like, if someone's here listening to Saagar because they agree with Saagar and his right-wing opinions, then maybe they'll be convinced listening to my left-wing opinions. And I think that's a pretty good way to approach it. And, it doesn't help to further fucking divide the country either. So I think that's a good part of their show too, because obviously there are people in the country that feel like Saagar does. Just because she's sitting next to him doesn't mean she fucking agrees or signs off on every single opinion that he fucking has. So, I'll just say that before we move on.
Lay on some of those implications.
Sure. So my reference point for the overall dynamic you're describing, in which some event takes place that produces a justifiable level of fear in the population, which is then seized upon by authorities and centers of power in order to exploit and augment that fear more and more as the days and months pass from that event in order to gain more power for themselves. Obviously, for me, at least, is based in my experience doing reporting on and analysis of the First War.
One of the things that really bothers me is when so-called political experts simplify the incredibly complicated network of like differing material interests down to like the deep state or the security state. I really don't like that. What group are we talking about? Are we talking about the military-industrial complex? Are we talking about like the State Department? Are we talking about like our foreign ally? Like what group? Because they all work together, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have the same interests. They want different things. For example, the military-industrial complex. I don't really think they care whether like America wins or America is strong. I think they care whether or not they get their contracts. If Lockheed Martin and Boeing we're still around after China annexed America, they would just keep doing their contracts for China. It's not like a nationalism thing. There are different interests here.
Okay, wait, can we break in here?
Is more.
Okay, because this is just, he's so jumble-brained and like doing this at like 100 miles an hour that this is another tactic for debate bros, right? They will throw all kinds of he's basically, it's really interesting, like as a breakdown to watch. He's basically just debate broing somebody that's not there without them. So it's like, imagine that he's like got an invisible destiny there. I think that's just what Vaush projects on everybody else, you know, so he can always feel like he's speaking to his heroes. But, you know, he's just there and he's like, well, you didn't say this. So what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? Well, what are you talking about? The military industrial complex? Because I think Lockheed Martin and a bunch of other names that I can fire off in close succession would still be doing all of this for China if China annexed America and brought us into their freaking country, which is what's going to happen if you keep challenging these orthodoxies, damn it.
Interested in like American hegemony, like foreign corporations and like the banking sector are probably just more interested in the flow of capital. Like there's so much, like there's so many complexities there, you know.
On terror, which was very similar. There was
hold on. You talk a big faith when it comes to it. You don't confront/attack them on their shows. Tim Pool and his podcast, Krystal and the Krystal Kyle and Friends. Yeah, that's because I'm appealing to different audiences. So what I never do is I never lie. If I'm on Tim Pool's show, my goal there isn't to talk to him the way that I would talk about Tim Pool over here, because if I did that, none of his audience would listen to me. Like at the end of the day, the outcome is what I care about. If I go over there and I'm just like, hey, everything you say is wrong. You lie in every single video. This is dumb as shit. Like it'll feel good for you guys, but it will.
That's an easy way to say I don't have the fucking balls to actually confront people when I'm on their show or have them on my show. Yeah, come on, Vaush. Oh, I'm actually just concerned about the outcomes. I just want to, you know, turn as many people to my ideology as possible. That's why I have this approach. It's like bullshit, bro. If you had that approach, then you would have that approach on your stream when you're talking about them, not just when you're actually talking to them. The reason why you don't actually confront people when you're talking to them is partially because you don't have the balls to, and second, because half the shit you're saying about these people isn't even true in the first place. For example, as you mentioned, Zach, he like falsely accused Krystal of like embezzling money from her congressional campaign or something ridiculous like that. But when he was on Krystal, Kyle and Friends, you would have never known that he had any issue with her or Kyle, who in the past he called like I don't even remember what he called him, like something heinous and horrible. He like went after Kyle Kalinske and has now spoken to him multiple times and, you know, been totally civil. And now he's like, I actually really like Kyle. So it's actually just a matter of, you know, you'll talk shit on people until you actually get to know them a little bit and become like friends with them, in which case you're like, oh, I don't want to talk shit on them. I actually like that person. Well, there was no difference. There was no change. It was just that you didn't have the actual balls to confront people about what they disagree with you on when you're actually right there in front of them. So I think that's pretty fucking weak, to be honest.
Oh, 100%. And there's one other thing there too, which is that I want to profit as much as possible off of these new audiences. And when I get invited on a show that has a bigger audience than me, I think I can pull a lot of them. And this is how you effectively wrangle up a big audience. You don't step on anybody's toes until you've got them in your trap, you know, until they've decided that, you know, because the whole game on internet, you know, spaces like this is you know, if you're big enough, right, if you're like a big name or the size Vaush wants to be, essentially what happens to your hardcore audience is they just take their brains off like this and then they put your brain in and it's like, I will defend and die for whatever this commentator says. I don't care, you know, if it's wrong or if it's crazy. So then you can, once you've reeled them in, you know, like Vaush will get him in his web. Then he's like, oh, then once I've got you, then I can start talking all kinds of crazy shit again. But really, it's all about just gaining subs. It's all about not losing your audience, making it as big as possible, casting a super wide net. Yeah, pretty obvious. He's just explaining how it's done right now. And you know, and then one thing that I'll say, Gavin's our go-to hammer the guest guys, because he always just will fucking jump out of the chair and be like, that's fucking bullshit. But it is harder than it looks. Like, you know what I mean? Like it is awkward afterwards. You're like, yep, all right, I guess like you know what I mean? I won't bring up some of our worst times, but
right. No, you're correct. And I also want to address this. Chuck asked, prove your position, Gavin, say something critical about Glenn right now, referencing the fact that because Glenn's been on our show, you know, you're making the assertion, well, why aren't we more critical of him? Is it because we've cozied up to him or whatever? No, actually, it's not. In fact, when we had Glenn on our show, I did argue with the motherfucker. We discussed our points of disagreements, and I did call him out on his comments that I thought were incorrect and unreasonable. Since then, I've been honest about the areas in which I disagree with Glenn on this show. I've expressed it multiple times. Usually when we talk about Glenn, I'll up front say, yeah, I don't agree with Glenn on everything. Some of his takes are further to the right than mine, etc. I've never shied away from that. And the difference is that before we talked to Glenn Greenwald on our show, we weren't making content like fucking slandering him and smearing him, and then just all that suddenly mysteriously stops after we talked to him one time. No, that's not how it went down at all. And like I said, I'm always honest about my disagreements with Glenn. So
we had a very publicly different take about the entire trial situation that just went down with Kyle Rittenhouse. You know, massively different. We were both fucking having very different analysis on our shows. And that's fine. But I also don't see Glenn as this guy that's pretending to be like something that he's not. He's very public about his views. People want to pretend that he's like a closeted person about his views. Like, oh, he's just a fucking, wolf in sheep's clothing for the right or whatever the fuck. I think that's horseshit. The dude's always been a heterodox thinker. Go back and read his actual fucking books if you want to know that. Like, read How Would a Patriot Act, and he's like, oh yeah, I believe in the Constitution. I consider myself like right along the line of like, Republican, Democrat, whatever. And everybody's like, why is this man not a diehard leftist now? And it's like, well, he never really has been. It didn't seem to me. He's just always been a pro anti-war voice and against the deep state, which he views as deeply rooted in our Constitution. And the fact that he's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, I'm gonna fucking talk to the guy. He has my respect. You know what I mean?
A traumatic event, which is the 9/11 attack that killed 3,000 Americans on the same day, but there was never any mass casualty attack anywhere close to it up until this very moment, 20 years later. And yet so many of the quote unquote temporary measures adopted in its
Wait, what? The only time we had a mass casualty event after 9/11 was the like 5 people who died at January 6th? Are we talking about COVID? COVID's a mass casualty event. January 6th wasn't a mass casualty. What?
I don't even think it was listed.
Act and a whole variety of other spying and detention powers.
Oh, he's talking about stuff that the State Department or like the deep state can use to legitimize.
What the fuck do you think he was talking about?
Of the security apparatus
remain not just embedded as though it happened a month ago rather than 20 years ago, but they've been expanded wildly beyond their original intent. And for years, that was the strategy, was to constantly remind people of how visceral those fears were, because fear is a very strong motivating factor for humans. Knowing that the more ethereal or abstract concerns on the other side of the ledger, the erosion of civil liberties, the invasion of privacy, the breakdown of due process.
And just to clarify, this isn't even necessarily Glenn's fucking, original thesis. This is the whole, what's that book called about this? After 9/11, they took advantage of the situation and...
Oh, it's like shock doctrine politics. Is that what you're talking about?
Shock doctrine. That's like a, universally recognized idea, a true thing that has happened over and over again in modern American history.
Naomi Klein is really respected even in the most liberal circles.
Yeah, that's the point I was making. It's not like this is Glenn like making some crazy conspiracy or whatever. Like, no, this is all pretty fucking obvious.
Much more abstract and distant concerns that are often no match for reminding people of 3,000 dead Americans buried under a huge pile of rubble. So that
what he's saying right now is completely correct. How the security state, the security agencies and the people who want to promote their interests will fearmonger in order to pass through. Like anyone who remembers like the Patriot Act and what happened after 9/11 and the whole like Iraq war era of like paranoia and like terrorism paranoia. Like, yeah, this is 100% true. The issue is that as far as I know, nothing happened as a product of January 6th. No new laws have been passed. So what he's saying right now is valid as a concept, but it doesn't apply to 1/6 because I don't think anything has happened.
Except for the $2.1 billion emergency funding bill for the Capitol fucking Police. Are we going to just forget about that? What the fuck?
Yeah, that's the whole thing. You just revealed you don't know what the fuck you're talking about at all right now, for one, because that was the one thing they did. They gave more money to the police right after George Floyd, when everybody and all of those congressional people were like, we need to defund the police. They were like, except for us, we need the police. This is different. Shh.
If Vaush doesn't bring that up at all, that's crazy dishonest. Let's see if he does. Again, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but let's see.
Like, what laws have been passed? What extensions have been made?
That is very much the similar dynamic.
They increased the Capitol Police budget. Yeah, that's not an apparatus of like national security. That's literally just like, hey, we need more guys in this building. Yeah, that's not. that's not. Yeah, they do that anyway.
I think we see that with COVID, by the way, as well.
All right. So, okay, sure. Maybe it's not as big of a deal as the Patriot Act. We haven't seen anything like that, admittedly, yet. But let's not underplay the $2.1 billion emergency funding bill for Capitol Police that, by the way, already had more than enough fucking police, already had way more than enough goddamn money in the first place to handle what happened on January 6th. If you were at any Black Lives Matter protest in a major city in this country, then you knew you saw with your own eyes the fact that the police could be dispatched in a military fashion quickly and efficiently and capable of crushing any sort of protest that it so wanted to. That was made very evident, again, by anyone who was actually at a George Floyd Black Lives Matter protest that got a little bit intense. We saw motherfucking militaries there, literally militaries occupying our streets. That's definitely what happened in Kansas City. And obviously Kansas City is not as big of a city as most cities. So, the fact that the police were not able to stop January 6th does not mean that they need another $2.1 billion in fucking funding, which did occur. And wasn't there a bunch of shady shit? Like they also slipped a bunch of like stuff for Afghanistan in there into that bill. There's something sketchy about them like also putting a bunch of like Afghanistan money in there or something weird about that. I don't want to talk about what I don't know about, but again, to underplay $2.1 billion in funding for the police, a police force which already had more than enough fucking resources to handle what happened on January 6th, but just clearly didn't. I wonder fucking why. I wonder, what was going on there. No, absolutely ridiculous to underplay that, in my opinion.
Yeah, so let me just go ahead and read this, and I'll share this article too, just because you were 100% right. There was some stuff about Afghanistan in there. I found this article about the 2.1 billion, the nothing that was done. That this is just peanuts. A couple more guys here and there. Really, that would have made all the difference. Apparently, the U.S. Congress on Thursday approved emergency funding to replenish the Capitol Police and bolster security after January 6th riot by supporters of then President Donald Trump, and to evacuate Afghans who helped American forces from their country. Okay. So those things seem intimately related. The $2.1 billion bill was passed by the Senate by a vote of 98-0, no nays. The House of Representatives, which had previously passed its own $1.9 billion bill, then promptly approved the Senate version by a vote of 416-11. The squad voted for that largely. I know they were not among the 11 holdouts. I believe those were Republicans. Clearing the way for President Joe Biden to sign it into law. The bill would provide $521 million to reimburse the National Guard units deployed for months during COVID following the riot, and $300 million for increased security measures at the site. Would also provide $71 million for Capitol Police to cover overtime costs, hire new officers, and other expenses. $35.4 million for the forces mutual aid agreements, so like union and good other shit for those cops that we don't get if you're a regular non-bootlicking employee of the government. Without fast action, Capitol Police funding will be depleted literally in a number of weeks, is the kind of shit they were saying. Either way, yeah.
Yeah, and again, like the crazy thing about January 6th is not that January 6th happened. It's the fact that the cops let it happen. The cops let that shit happen, guys. Don't get it fucking twisted. Again, if this was a left-wing protest, there is no fucking way that those people would have gotten a mile close to the Capitol. No fucking way in a million years. So
shot down in the street.
Shot dead. The only interesting thing about January 6th to me is the fact that the establishment and the police state let it fucking happen. So, not to take off the fucking guilt or not to take the blame away from the crazies that did it, the Trump supporters that did it. Yes, a lot of those people were genuinely fascists. There were people with Confederate flags. I'm not trying to fucking underplay the threat of right-wing extremism. That being said, that was a more than controllable mob of fucking Trump supporters. The amount of police that not only is in DC, but is in the surrounding fucking areas in Virginia and stuff like that could have so fucking easily handled that crowd and prevented them from even getting close to the fucking Capitol, that the fact that they did in the first place raises so many goddamn red flags. You add to that the fact that there were feds spotted there, and sure, there's feds spotted at fucking BLM events too. That doesn't mean that they orchestrated it. But the fact that there were feds there, and the fact that the police let motherfuckers break into the Capitol and breach security certainly raises some red flags. And to say that it's insane to have a conversation about that or to discuss and acknowledge that fact makes you some sort of right-wing conspiracy theorist is just plain dishonest in service of the bullshit point you're trying to make, which again is what Vaush is great at doing.